It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce John Hoppenthaler to the Crazy Wisdom Poetry Circle. John is a multi-talented individual, a writer of poetry and essays, an editor, professor of English and creative writing at East Carolina University, and co-director of ECU's Contemporary Writer Series. He received his MFA from Virginia Commonwealth University. John has 4 books of poetry, all published by Carnegie Mellon Press, which include Lives of Water, Anticipate the Coming Reservoir, Domestic Garden, and Night over Metropolitan Area. His poems, essays, and interviews have appeared in many publications, including Plowshares, Virginia Quarterly Review, New York Magazine, Southern Review, Poetry Northwest, the Literary Review, and Blackbird, as well as in many other journals, anthologies, and textbooks. John Hoppenthaler was editor of A Poetry Congeries for 10 years and was the poetry editor of Kestrel for 12 years. He and Kazim Ali also co-edited a volume of essays on the poetry of, I'm not sure if it's Jean or Jean Valentine.
It's Jean.
This World Company, published by the University of Michigan Press. For 9 years, John served as personal assistant to the Nobel Prize-winning author Toni Morrison. Wow, that's amazing. In a 2013 interview with Story South, when asked about his use of humor in poetry, John shared that a childhood aspiration was to become a comedian. He apparently succeeded as far as receiving the title of class clown. He described his use of humor as organic in his writing, being one who likes to crack jokes with others. In John's poem, Dinner at the Wok and Roll Buffet, I found humor, pathos, and social commentary intertwined in a poem that starts with guilt about being on the road. In the same interview, John stated that many of his poems are persona poems. He creates stories or vignettes that may incorporate some truths from his own life, but which are not necessarily factual. He stated, quote, "So it's about the larger human truths for me, not whether or not a poem's personal details are accurate. Who cares? It's art." In his poems, Waterfall 1 and Waterfall 2, 2 generations are beautifully represented, moving backward and forward in time. It's certainly the truth, even if not entirely factual. We're in for a treat, so please welcome tonight's reader, John Hoppenthaler.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to read mostly from my brand new book, Nightwing over Metropolitan Area, which the official publication date is October 31st, but you can apparently get it now. And I've put in the chat a link to all 4 of my books to our distributor there for Carnegie Mellon University Press. You know, things haven't been that funny in the last 6, 7, 8 years or so in my world, and I know in yours. So unfortunately, this new book doesn't have a lot of humor in it, but I may switch out the last poem I was going to read for the one you just mentioned to maybe bring a little levity into it at that point. Anyway, I hear the control tower, and it looks like we're cleared for takeoff. And whether it's takeoff or landing, I don't know. The first poem of the book and the title poem of the book is Nightwing over Metropolitan Area. And it's after the painting that is my book cover by an artist named Yvonne Helene Jacquet. And it's a painting you can see at the North Carolina Museum of Art if you're ever there. Nightwing over Metropolitan Area. Wing of a blackbird, wing of a crow. If I seem a vulture sometimes, on the wing, adrift toward carrion, indistinct architecture of loss, its ambiance. The hydraulic whine and thud of the landing gear, absence of towers, moderate tremor of shear and turbulence. No, not buildings, only insistent light that props them up, their corporeal bodies dissolved, enormous emptiness, which itself is full of color, ghosts of light beyond emptiness, that which defines them, that which looms outside the frame, space between us, the pregnant darkness of our city, and a million tiny votives that oppose. The Nightwing hangs, sags toward you with gravity, weight of 1,000 corpses, screech of a virus, that shrill hawk as I circle in a holding pattern. And all I can see is primary color, pointillism of what's left behind or flown toward, fugitive colors, especially the blue rims of your eyes. I lift or descend, and it seems the same. Proximity may as well be absence. Arrival means another place has been left behind. And I'm taking off or landing to deliver what support I can. We are two dark birds together, keeping raptors at bay there, out over the river. Superstition. Who has turned the Jade Elephant's head from the door? That won't do, with a gunman still on the loose, herons flapping too close to the house. So I turned fire tongs for luck, cast table salt into flames. I spent the whole night pointing at the moon before I could fall asleep, creamy light shining on my face. But by morning, my OCD flared again. I tapped my forehead 3 times, rapped the doorframe, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Mostly, I have it under control. Most of the time, I only do it once. When the 3rd heart attack killed my father, I knew it was a liar. I could finally let up. All that dread had no place, and the wound seemed to heal. My father died doing what he'd been told not to do. He fell to the snow he'd cleared from his car. He died on a mattress of snow. Not even the scar I'd scored into my chest with a silver crucifix had the power to save him. When the snow melted and dried, I swept dust from the spot into an envelope. Mom sold the house and moved away. Years later, I mixed that dust with flour and baked coarse bread. I put some on my tongue and let it dissolve. I swallowed with wine and waited, fixed the elephant's green head toward the door. Urban Cigarettes, Van Morrison, Lake Anna, Virginia. The winds picked up, rattling half-dead leaves, snapping off acorns that clatter through branches and thud to the ground. Wasps circle the screened-in porch, probe corners, and the sky's brief flirtation with blue has passed beyond the gray shade, drawn over hills beyond the lake's far shore. Every now and then, a gust catches the ceiling's the ceiling fan's wicker paddles, and they turn slowly. It's nearly too obvious. Autumn begins in beauty and ends with a cold rainstorm in late November, too dismal to mean anything else but winter. I've forgotten how music can shift the body into depression like this, how memory clings like cigarette smoke to a damp sweater, and rain begins drilling at the roof. Van Morrison's given way to only that percussion. Whiskey's flame in my belly. My mother no longer speaks, but she grins horribly at the nursing home. Flick spit those days when she fails to recognize me. The wasps have given up. Eventually, so does the rain. In my younger days, I spent a lot of time in bars, so I love bar poems, and I've written a number of them. It's how I got the job with Toni Morrison. I was first her bartender for a catering company, and then that's how I got to meet her first. Happy hour at Joey Roma's restaurant and bar. The guy at the end of the bar, who'd been drinking vodka martinis for 2 hours, swiveled his stool as if making a difficult decision and had just decided to act. Bathroom break, I thought. But he tottered onto the riser in the corner, dropped his ass down on the bench, and bent into the yellowing keyboard of the scarred piano balanced near the edge. It doesn't matter what he played. It could have been any old standard. But the thing is delicate interpretation. How everyone stopped talking to listen for 5 minutes or so before he collapsed into a discordant heap. And then how most looked away and resumed conversations, ordered another round, twirled spaghetti on a fork. It all seemed part of the act. Nothing to see here, and when in Roma's, I've always wanted to be that stranger who materializes in a bar, has a few cocktails among locals, then sits down before the altar of all sad melodies, cracks his stiff knuckles and begins to play. I fight the urge to go up and hug the man. He still has a song, and there are so many other tragedies. So this new book has several threads. One of them has to do with my stepson, Danny, who suffers from various sorts of mental illness, OCD, ADHD, anxiety, Tourette's. I mean, he's basically got it all. And, you know, part of the book is also about the stresses that that puts on a marriage, right? Dealing with that situation. And at the same time, my mother, who had a stroke sometime after my father died, she had a few happy years in Florida where she had relocated and then had a stroke and was in a nursing home then for over a decade, nearly 2 decades, and slowly, evaporated into the realm of dementia, basically. So, like I said, this isn't the happiest book, but all these threads kind of work together, so you'll hear poems that kind of touch on all of these things going forward. So this is one of them. It's called Your Daydreaming Child. Aren't you mad when the note comes home from school? You have a problem, child. Instead of finishing math or science, he's wasting time. Aren't you so damned angry that you yell and threaten, scream? Why the hell can't you just pay attention? But your child is completely at attention, fully present, and dealing with the fear that his left arm is longer than his right. He's trying so hard to make them even. Under the desk, he's sticking himself with a pin or struggling to force the tips of his index and middle fingers to line up. Try it yourself. Try to push your index finger forward out of its socket. Keep at it. If you manage, maybe it's true that an arm can be stretched into compliance. He knows the teacher's glaring at him, that the period is almost over, and so The period is almost over, ritual kicks in. The spiral notebook's edge lined up with the rim of the desktop. 3 Ticonderoga pencils back to back, number 2s in their ovals, each eased 1/4 turn toward the wall clock to push along the minute hand. It's been going on like this for months. Now, in exactly 3 minutes before the bell goes off, he has to count the cursive letters of the alphabet taped above the chalkboard. A for apple, B for balloon, C for canary. It is his own kind of math, but he can never get it to add up. It's the dreaded new math with which you both must now contend. You must open the book and learn it together. I was really fortunate to get 2 amazing blurbs for this book. One by the wonderful poet Brian Turner, who himself has 3 books out at the same time with CDs from Alice James books. Of course, Here Bullet, his first book, just sold a gazillion copies. The first book by a person who served in the military from the Gulf War. The other blurb is from perhaps a musician you guys might know of, Roseanne Cash, singer-songwriter, Grammy Award winner. And I have no idea how I managed to get her to do it. I just took a flyer and asked, and she agreed to look at the book. But this is one of the poems that Roseanne kind of focused on in her blurb. And it comes from an actual thing. I actually saw this thing. Part of the poem is imaginatory, but the other part, the event that it describes actually happened. Shrine. I was driving through rural Delaware, and I'd never seen it before. Someone present and mourning at a roadside memorial, middle-aged woman in a house dress, kneeling on a sloped berm, bent over a homemade cross, spray of cut flowers splayed beside her on the scuffy grass. It couldn't have been a more beautiful day. Scrimshaw clouds skimming through pale blue sky like swimming angels or sea creatures too singular to name. In the back of my mind, for weeks, that lone woman curating grief while big rigs wind by. Rainy vacation Polaroids, languid jellyfish, their dangling tentacles, and other vague chimeric visitations. All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. This is called After Listening to the Weather, I Pull into a Bar. Bar poems. Sometimes, miles from home, you find wings just the way you like them. The beer is cold and cheap. The bartender doesn't care about you and the things you might say. These are small blessings. A dive that takes you in this way, comfortable enough to pay you no mind until your lager runs dry. Pool balls clack, a wager is made, and you decide to pray to the bones piled up on your plate. Thank them for what they've given you. A local feeds a buck into the jukebox, and it's not late yet, you think. It's a song you don't hate from the 90s, full of pity and regret. The tender shimmies, putters with the liquor bottles. Her body language won't prattle, show those things you aren't meant to see. In the parking lot, you feel drizzle on your face, just as predicted. Soon it turns to rain. Planted, still you fail to leave. Trees begin to sway. Hummingbirds and eagles. The whir of hummingbird wings, first here, then fluttering over the pond, the wall of pine, afternoon suns mirrored lazy flickering. And the place where just last weekend we watched an eagle stand with certainty on the bank before dipping into a long pool of water, before lifting over greenery and disappearing, as eagles seem destined to do. Hummingbirds are cantankerous creatures at the feeder, taking time only to hover briefly, tiny bodies flapping under their riveted heads, bickering for position, fencing with long beaks, then thrusting them into the well. Sometimes we disappear, or so it seems, into the neuroses of hummingbirds. We want the nectar, that's all, and when it's gone, we apologize, my love, and fall into making up. We drink deeply of it, approach even the nobility of eagles. Hummingbirds can fly backwards, sideways, hover up and down. They wear their wedding clothes the rest of their lives. Fashioned from leftover feathers the gods used to create other birds, their long tongues bypass the bitter protections of flowers. They bring good luck, so we offer them succor. I hold the funnel in place while you pour sugar water, blood red, into the feeder. Steady me as I stretch from the footstool to hang it from a small hook under the eave. I step down into waiting arms. You sink your talons nearly to the bone. Tell me that you'll never leave. Thank you. Well, this one's kind of funny. It's called Nocturne. It's from my wife, Christy. Last night, a barred owl swept across the road, plunged into the hillside, then ascended some rodent, its clock run out in its beak. The owl settled into the nearby crook of an oak and consumed it at its leisure. For 20 minutes or so, it perched there, the occasional swivel of its head my way, pale face under a pale half moon sizing me up, near drunk at the railing. Lord knows it could have been the alcohol, but I was at mass, a kind of rapture. Earlier, the roar, distorted road music, bike after bike, rolling through Eureka, startling birds and the poets. I'd seen two eat pussy, not pavement t-shirts in the space of an hour. Born they are, but not so wild as they dreamed to be. Long, gray beards flapping in the breeze, leather-clad women clutching behind them, tanned arms wrapped around prodigious midsections, pressed tight, keeping their motors running. And now, all seems less dire. Pale face under pale half moon, a fierce plunging, keen desire, and you so far away for so long now. These spring leaves, owl in their veiling, wet road shining below, and I'm wrapped at the edge of the railing. Thank you. Well, I hate to get a little mildly political here, but there's a section of the book that's actually a suite of poems. The great, it's called Great Again, a suite, and I'll read 3 of those poems. One's a little longer. I guess you'll determine where my politics lie. So the first poem is called Great Again, and it was written at Southern Pines, North Carolina in 2018. A hummingbird just visited the porch, attracted perhaps by my red beer cozy. Or maybe she's the raven at the window this morning, shape-shifted now to remind me of change. A cherry bomb explodes beyond the trees, a bullfrog bellows prematurely. On another day, I'd have thought gunshot. It's the first thing that goes through everyone's mind. Another unarmed black body, bullet hole in the back. Everyone's mind polluted with noise. And now another blast, hollow point, disturbing the peace. My father hated the 4th of July. He'd escaped communists in Romania, was born into war. If you want fireworks, he'd say, go join the army. He loved his new country, but it was hard labor he believed in most, his American dream for us. He worked himself to death. It's taken me 57 years to feel this bull's eyes growth like wings, dead between my shoulder blades. As if you hadn't already noticed, birds are a main motif of this book and frequently a symbol as well. This is called Bird Riff. Rancor lilies clamor in the White House garden. Gardener maddened, birds frightened and take to the wing. Tasting freedom again, Noah's dove never returned. Birds, emboldened now, taunt from nearby trees, squawk into microphones and shit on the window panes. Birds have hollow bones. That's why flight is a fragile miracle, held aloft by faith and science. And birds, descended from dinosaurs, are creatures of instinct, not smart, but wary. Millions of birds are killed each year by domestic and feral cats, or shredded in wind turbines. 3 women are killed each day by domestic violence in the US. Some birds are immigrants who come and go through fluid borders. If left alone, they are beautiful while they're here. Hummingbirds squabble and fence with their beaks over red-dyed sugar water poured into feeders. They hover, I assume, near lilies in the garden of the White House. They've mistaken all the blood for food. We've given Donald a BB gun as a gift. We've told him to go out and play. Put out your eye, Donald, then put out the other. Thousands of songbirds are killed each year by careless children. A murmuration of starlings shifts as one body in flight. The swirl confuses owls and hawks. When the sun goes down, they roost together in a safe patch of trees. I love the audacity of birds, braving larger tormentors, chasing them from their nests. A Stone Age vulture bone flute is likely the oldest musical instrument. Researchers guess music helped humans communicate and form tight social bonds, air blown through a vulture bone or its trilling from the throats of wrens. For some indigenous Americans, eagle bone flutes are sacred objects used for sun dancing, praying, and healing. I love the audacity of birds, braving tormentors and chasing them from their nests. The mobbing call is delivered, and they cooperate. Harass predators to protect their young. Nestlings leap free of their moss-woven vantage points and into faith and science. When you see a dead bird on the roadside, spit on it so you don't get it for supper. When you hear a bird thud against the glass, cringe and await death in the family. A swallow flew down the chimney and circled the room 3 times before I thought to open the front door and encourage him out. The sun dance was prohibited by immigrant settlers. Indigenous people weren't allowed to openly practice the ceremony again until the late 1970s, after a period of high-profile activism, including legal challenges to those laws. Noah's dove never returned after the 3rd flight, but after the 2nd, when the dove alit onto his hand in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Listen to the mockingbird, still singing where the weeping willows wave. All right, this one is called The Nature of Nature. A bluebird shows itself, disappears beyond tall pines, then reappears in the bright golden company of lesser goldfinch. Big colors against summer greenery. Be bold but small, they insist, and quick to the wing, because difference is dangerous in America, no matter how well you sing. Now one, now two, now three turkey vultures circle the air above, and that's not a welcome omen. The bumblebee buzzing my colorful beer can, a Belgian triple, is only confused for a moment, climbs, then jets for the bed of blazing star. There are spikes of tiny pink flowers, elephant ears lining the brick wall behind the lily pond, or eavesdropping, and will never forget my candor here without you. Even they feel injured, and the bullfrog bellows, registers his own complaints. Why me? Why me? 3 years ago today, I sat here, same spot, Trump 2 years in, and heard stray fireworks that led me to think of gunshots, that brought me to remember my father, that brings me to consider Danny, riddled with his own collateral damage, and you, Christy, and the frazzled state of our union. I ask Colocasia, they always remember. His illness threatens with the bulk of a pachyderm. Weymouth is beautifully curated and reminds me of privilege. A black-chinned hummingbird darts past, jabs a while at purple blooms in a pot. He jerks his head, swivels, flits closer, stops, flits once more, stops hard and hovers 12 inches from my face to address me with kindness. Then he repairs to his supper, while tandemed cardinals, one the muddy color of dried blood, the other vivid blood red, forage, young lovers there among the manicured shrubbery, be bold but small, quick to the wing, bang. Cherry bomb in the distance. I've killed so many birds. Thoughtless kid with a pellet rifle. I don't know why they show me such grace. They forget, I think, or forgive, while I've neither forgiven nor forgotten. Keep mercy dead in my crosshairs. Bang. A flurry shudders the white hydrangeas. All right, hope you're doing okay. I'm going to shift to the last part of the book. And this one is called 1 Week Before the Solstice, 12/14/2020. I went to the local market to pick up a few holiday things. A rosemary topiary shaped like a Christmas tree, a chocolate Santa for Danny, a bag of mixed nuts maybe to crack in front of the fire with Christy. Disguised, I dodged masked strangers, remembered a miracle, the gluten-free gravy and 3 lemons. The Electoral College confirmed Joe Biden today. The orange monster bound for one hell or another, but in the nursing home, my mother wastes away into a COVID New Year. Tomorrow, I'll arrange for a virtual appearance. Her room has a sizable window, so I hope for a flurry while we Zoom. She's lost speech, and her mind may as well be a nostalgic snow globe. With a slight jerk of her head, she'll conjure a beautiful landscape, captive and captivating, sifting in stray beams of remembered sunlight. An Amazon van rumbles through the cul-de-sac. I plug in the colored lights. Rosemary graces the air faintly with pine. Hazelnuts, walnuts, almonds, and pecans fill the festive bowl. Sally, the neighbor's border collie, begins to bark, and I'm grateful to be alone tonight. I'm filigreed ice, flimsy on the glittering surface of Pablo's metal water dish, short-lived, fragile as mom's whisper in winter dark. Okay, this one's a little longer too, and addresses my stepson. I had an epiphany one day that, back when they did, the Exorcist notwithstanding, when they did exorcisms, just imagine how many people who were mentally ill were exorcised, right? Thought that they were possessed by the devil, and that kind of hit me. So this poem came out of that. Some other things. I wrote a bunch of these poems in three places really. One is the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts in Virginia. One is the Dairy Hollow writing colony in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and the other is at the Southern Pines at the Weymouth Center for the Humanities. So this one was written in Arkansas. Jesus, Frankenstein, Danny's monsters. An Ozark lightning storm flickers the night sky like a black and white movie, like Victor Frankenstein's laboratory. Thunder rumbles through the mountains. The breeze kicks up, and again it begins to rain. Again, a flood warning startles my cell phone. I don't know what I can say about his ambition, his sin of conjuring a new life free of sin. I don't buy that, of course. Sin is an acquired talent. But what might appear sin at arm's length, behavior that seems from one safe distance ungodly, perhaps diabolical, is sometimes an original weight, genetic imbalance, a sin of God if sin must be ascribed. I think sometimes how my stepson in less enlightened times would have been exorcised. It's that simple. Ticking of Tourette's, OCD, the inability to read facial expressions and self-harm, the kid never would have had a chance. He might not have a prayer still, as far as enlightenment goes. We've no fear of holy water, the Bible, beads, or crucifix. Those tools of the trade we can keep at arm's length. It's not the clergy keeping us up at night. Frankenstein wanted to father a being without defects, but the monster was stitched together with human parts, so quickly learned of human sin, how it feels to be shunned by even one's creator. I can't help but sympathize with Victor. The Synoptic Gospels credit Jesus for the exorcism of a demonically possessed, moonstruck boy, foaming at the mouth and unwilling to speak. How much longer must I be among you? Jesus asked the crowd. A faithless generation, he christened them, before the boy's father explained that the child's suffering began at birth. It was epilepsy. We know now, no demon at all. Jesus Christ then was a doctor, not an exorcist. This detracts not at all from the miracle. I believe, help my unbelief, the man had begged. And so would you in similar circumstances. Again, that flashing of lightning. Again, I'm in the lab, ready to pull any damn switch, confront any damn God blocking my way. That's what I choose to believe, sure. Another boom shakes the window. More pelting rain. Later, Jesus revealed to the disciples why they'd failed at their attempts to cure the boy. This kind, said the Savior, can come out only through prayer. How much longer, he asked, must I be among you? As if he had something better to do than heal the sick. The electricity has failed. I light beeswax candles to keep the child's monsters at bay. I should don my purple hoodie and take a long walk in the rain. Such sacrilege and miracles, and no sane place to keep our grief. I believe. Help my unbelief. My second spring. It's said, if a man witnesses in a single year a second spring, he pays with a season from his life. Thousands of miles away, thanks to this new climate's largesse, summer has already begun. Fledglings peer from the lips of nests. Behold the huge, peculiar world into which each bird will tumble. Gray squirrels gambol and flirt below. Our spent azalea blossoms rot into soil. Let it be winter, I relinquish. If it must be an early death. My father's plummet into a snowbank he'd shoveled, how his heart gave out in the cold. His only instruction was not to be set into frozen earth. I saw his smoke, therefore, sifting through March, strokes from that gray palette. Amen, then. It's winter, I'll forfeit. And I'll end with these two poems. This is one I wrote at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts in Amherst, Virginia, in the mountains not far from Charlottesville. A beautiful place. And right at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And a lot of my poems kind of come out of some research. I'll start a poem and then kind of get online and look at Wikipedia for a while or whatnot to find some additional stuff to kind of throw in there. And I learned the fact about why the Blue Ridge Mountains are blue. And kind of comes out in this poem. It's called To the Bone, Amherst, Virginia, 1/21/2022. The Blue Ridge Mountains are cobalt blue today, almost unnaturally so, wrapped around the frozen distance. Such a beautiful obstacle, hazing the air with isopropene, giving this range its color, accounting for 1/3 of all hydrocarbons released into the atmosphere. It's hard to argue with the appropriateness of such blue in our time. A married pair of cardinals offer the only other hues against the drab gray, posted there in bare branches to bear witness. To whistle our story of mutual doom into the wind. Yesterday's slush cracks under my shoes, and my mother's ashes are stored on a shelf in New York, waiting. We are waiting together for the appropriate blue, convenient day, my sisters and I, to slide her into a Ferncliff mausoleum drawer next to our father, who's had to wait to lie with his wife once more. That is the story as my own body begins humming its winter song. How cold it is outside. Everything at the point of breaking. Thank you. How am I doing on time?
You're good.
Good.
It's, coming up on 7:53 right now.
So maybe I can
Right
fit
on
in
schedule.
another poem too. Great. I'm gonna. So as was mentioned previously, I was Toni Morrison's personal assistant for 9 years, and you can find the story. You Google me online. That the piece I wrote for New York Magazine kind of talks about that. One of the things that happened before she died was that the Toni Morrison Society came to her with an idea that came from an essay of hers talking about there being no bench on the side of the road where one can consider African American history. And they said, well, let's put some benches in places where people can do that. And Toni was all for it. And should you want to place a bench somewhere, it's not cheap, but you can do that. So they're in a number of places. One of them is in Memorial Park in Nyack, New York, which is just down the road from where I worked for her, where her home was, one of her homes, her main home. And one of them, believe it or not, is in South Carolina on Hilton Head Island, where there's a place called Mitchellville, which was a town built during the American Civil War for formerly enslaved people. And it has a long history, but basically, apparently it basically was abandoned at around 1890 or so. But when I visit my in-laws there who live in Hilton Head, on a plantation, right? Which is ironic. I like to go to Mitchellville and sit on that bench and think about Toni and think about the history of that place. And so this poem kind of came out of that. Mitchellville, South Carolina, in memoriam Toni Morrison. In my head, I can't help but hear the stomp and shuffle, clap and joy of Christmas Eve into Christmas Day. Draped over live oak limbs, Spanish moss resembles the gray beards of elders. Its resilience, how it assimilates nutrients solely from air, trapping water and particulates, silver garland tossing its seed to the winds to survive. For the Mitchellville freedmen, perhaps it offered solace as they stepped from the praise house, fatigue and holiness, emergent joy, only such dedication to purpose can conjure. Ghost notes sound the morning mist. The salt marsh surrounds Fishhole Creek, just below Port Royal Plantation, where contrabands would be enslaved. Toni, from your bench by the road, I look out over marsh grass, gray span of water in the distance, almost indistinguishable from sky, but for one thin band of pale blue, and therein the dark outline of a passing kayaker. I envision him, one of the chosen, casting a hand-fashioned net from his bateau, the process unchanged from biblical times, skill passed from grandfathers and fathers, each net begun with 36 eyes tied together with 18,000 knots, 200 hours of labor to create meshwork with a 5-foot circumference. Some slaves escaped into the confusion of the Battle of Port Royal Sound. Others were just left behind. As in the aftermath of a hurricane, the owners later returned to see what property could be salvaged after naval ships and guns disappeared. In the end, it wasn't much of a fight. Each 12 by 12 shotgun house had its quarter acre for farming greens and sweet potatoes. Toni, there's something in the tortured limbs of older trees that have withstood too many storms. The last time I sat here, only 2 years ago, this bench seemed not so weathered. Now it appears tethered between spirit and flesh, shackles and levitation. Groups of vacationers, all white and COVID distance, stroll by to visit the end of the dock. I don't think they know what this is. Beloved, there was a window, 10 minutes maybe, when it was all silence. Some elders appeared, faint clapping, stomp and shuffle, counterclockwise circle, song and praise, haunted chants the prayer house can't hold. They ringed the building, traversing time, turning to pure spirit before me, they lifted as one toward the ether, and even Jesus there to usher toward hush. The rarely seen clapper rail calling, riding this cloudy sky. All right, I'm going to end with the poem that Lissa mentioned that ends my last book, Domestic Garden. And I had gained a lot of weight, and my wife forbade me one of the things that I love to do, and is go to all you can eat Chinese buffets, right? The worst thing for you in the world. So this poem kind of comes out of that, and I've lost most of that weight now. So it feels odd to read this poem now as a thinner person, but there's still a fat person inside me. So dinner at the Walk and Roll buffet. Guilty is how I feel on the road. Floozies sing to me from the hotel's lobby bar. Floozies seem everywhere, multiplying, as if I travel a hall of mirrors. But across the service road is all I can eat, watching brave rush hour traffic remain faithful to you. A Chinese buffet is where the overweight take their last meals. It worries me to death that I'm here. Try not to stare. Consider instead the grease congealed on your china. Every trip to the trough requires another clean plate. Signs are hung to remind you. The dishes are scratched. Decorative rims have faded with the washing. A Chinese buffet is a whorehouse. Still, fat people arrive. The hostess loses her face. She whispers in her daughter's ear, tell them in back, more kung pao, more beef on a stick. She dreams thousands of deep fryers orbiting Earth, watches them glisten like stars. The fat people change and grow unearthly. Unaffected by gravity, they gracefully maneuver space around steam tables, steel serving spoons held daintily in their swollen hands. Wok music clatters through the tiny kitchen window. She hates this dying from hunger. She hates how her face changes when she sees them at the door, the fat ones, the sad ones, how the restaurant loses money on them, how after eating their weight in egg rolls, they rise, coke-bloated angels, generous tips blazing the red tablecloths, as if generosity could make up the difference, as if guilt was a toll road, and here I've paid. So good night. There's ice cream on a chubby boy's shirt. He's smiling, and his oversized eyes are absurdly beautiful. I've given in my love to desire so that I might die fat in your arms. Thank you.